In Stranger Things, does Will actually have superpowers? And was it actually Will and not 11 who made the Upside Down? Hi guys, it's Eve. Welcome back to my channel. Stranger Things 5 is rapidly approaching. I'm actually filming this on Stranger Things Day on November the 6th. I don't know if I'll get it up the same day or maybe later, but either way, yeah, we've not got long to wait. And I have a few theories. I really have one main big theory. It's sort of made up of little theories and about how I think the season's gonna end, what I think will be explained in season 5, and I'm just gonna get straight into it and talk to you about my Stranger Things season 5 theories. If you're new here, I'd be so grateful if you join our little family here on YouTube. I talk about all things TV, film, Harry Potter, Stranger Things, any sort of sci-fi fantasy shows and films I adore. If you like that sort of thing, then make sure you click the subscribe button. My main theory, the overarching theory, is that I think Will has powers. And I actually think that he might have been one of the children that was sort of part of everything that was going on in Hawkins Lab. Now, probably straight away you're like, well, hang on, what about this? What about this? I'm gonna go through it all. So how does Will have powers? Why does he have powers? So the big thing that made me think about this whole theory to start off with was season 1, when Elle recognises Will in the photo. She looks at the photo and points. She recognises Will and she knows where he is. This I always found like wasn't fully explained. Like, how does she recognise Will? It's put down to she's seen him in the Upside Down, because she does explain, like, she puts over the board and it's like, he's here. But Will goes missing and Elle escapes the lab on the same day. Will only goes missing after she made the gate. 11, when on earth would she have had time to go back to her like mind place between escaping and then coming across Mike and everyone? The last time she went in her mind thing was when she touched the Demogorgon and opened the gate. So how would she have seen Will in the Upside Down? Because she hasn't done her thing where she goes into her mind place. So how does she recognise him? How does she know what he looks like? If it was put down to she can sense what's happening in the Upside Down, she would have also recognised Barb. She'd have recognised Barb and known, yes, I know Barb doesn't survive, but she would have known that someone else went in the Upside Down. And if she had the connection because Will was there, she would have had the connection because Barb was there. That isn't really a valid explanation that she can just sense that he's in the Upside Down. It just doesn't make sense, because she would have sensed that Barb was there. Even though she then died, she would have sensed it. Which is why I think 11 actually recognised Will already. She recognised him because she's seen him before. Because Will was also at Hawkins Lab and was one of the kids with powers there. I think he's only at the lab briefly. I think he was part of that whole project and experiment, but they thought it didn't work on him. Because his powers are so different to the others, they didn't present themselves in the same way. They didn't know what they were. He thought he would also have telekinesis or making people see things, and he wasn't presenting any of that because his powers are different. Their creation and all the things he creates end up being in a different dimension. So they were like, well, he's not got any powers, because they couldn't see it. They weren't testing for the right thing either. They were doing all the tests for the powers everyone else had, but actually Will's was very different. So they thought, it hasn't worked with him, he's not got a power, and that's why he doesn't stay at the lab. They basically like give him back to Joyce. This could be why then he doesn't have a tattoo, because he didn't show powers, so they didn't give him a tattoo. Or in season 1, when they're trying to identify what they think is Will's body, Joyce says he has a birthmark on his arm. This could just be a throwaway comment and purely be put in for the purpose of identifying Will. But what if that birthmark is actually like the tattoo removed? He had a tattoo, they removed it, now it looks like a birthmark. It could be that. So they gave him back, but they kept Joyce and Will alive and didn't try and cover things up there, because they sort of needed to keep them alive, because what if Will presented with powers later? They had to keep close tabs on them. That's why they're always monitoring everything that's happening in Hawkins as well, because they, you know, there's the potential that one of their test subjects, one of the kids is in Hawkins living normally, so they need to keep a very close eye on things to make sure he doesn't present with powers, and if he does, they need to bring him back in. You know, the lab have shown that they'll let people live knowing things as long as they promise they don't say anything, and the first sign they give of just, you know, of going against that, you're in trouble. Obviously, you're probably thinking, well, how does Joyce come into this? I think Joyce was one of the pregnant mothers that was involved in Dr. Brenner's second wave of tests. So basically, as a reminder, there was Henry Creel that got powers. That's all explained in the first shadow. I don't want to spoil that, but Henry Creel got powers in a different way. Dr. Brenner wanted to recreate that. He wanted more Henry Creels. So he created this experiment where he had loads of different volunteers, men, women, all sorts, to see if he could give them super ability. It didn't work, but he found that one of the test subjects, Terry Ives, became unknowingly pregnant during the experiment, and then she gave birth to a child with powers. So Dr. Brenner replicated this. He did a second study where he only recruited pregnant women, because that he now knew what to do. He knew how to now create these kids with powers. So he only recruited pregnant women. And Hawkins Lab is in Hawkins. He'd have put out an ad saying, "We're looking for pregnant women to come and earn money to be part of this experiment." Joyce would have been pregnant around this time because Will and Elle are similar in age, so around all that time that was happening, Joyce would have been pregnant. Joyce and Lonnie were together at that point. What do we know about Lonnie? What is one of the few things we've seen of Lonnie and we've learned of Lonnie? We saw when he came for Will's funeral, he was looking at ads at ways to make money, at ways to get compensation. He wants money. He will literally use his kids for money, because he was going to use his son's death to get money. That was basically the whole reason he came to Hawkins when Will was missing. So, if there was an ad going round saying, if there's any pregnant women in Hawkins, come to the lab, you'll get some money. Joyce and Lonnie live right by the lab. Do you not think Lonnie would have obviously volunteered Joyce? Of course he would. He'd have pushed Joyce into it. He'd have said, look, the lab's down the road. Go on, why not? Go, you're pregnant. Go make some money. 100%. And they were together at that point. So Joyce probably, you know, was like, okay, and listened to him, and he was able to convince her. So she went. As you know, we know the Byers struggle financially. So of course Lonnie would go for that. She would have been pregnant. They live by the lab. It all makes complete sense. She'd have gone at the sort of push of Lonnie, been part of this experiment, gave birth. They wouldn't have necessarily taken Will straight away, because if you think about Callie, so 11's sister, the newspaper article says like that she was kidnapped. And if you look at the picture, she was much older. She was probably about 5, 6 when she was kidnapped, so she wasn't taken at birth like 11 was. She was taken later. So that might have been because she didn't present with powers until later. It doesn't seem to be the case they were all taken straight away. So maybe Joyce was able to take Will home, he wasn't taken straight away, and they just monitored. Maybe with all of these kids, they were monitoring, are they presenting with powers? And then at the point where they saw them presenting with powers, that's when they took the child. So that's what they did with Joyce and Will. The reason why they might be so close to the lab is because of the experiment. Maybe they did live a bit further away before, and then they moved closer to it because Joyce had to keep going back with Will. Maybe. I think they probably already lived there. But they go back and they kept doing tests, but Will wasn't presenting. He wasn't presenting with powers, so they never kept him. They never took him. They didn't properly put him in with the others. So then why would 11 recognise Will? Because he'd have been in and out of the lab. They probably kept him for a bit sometimes, put him with the others to see again if he'd present with powers. And so that's why I think why 11 recognises him, because he'd come into the lab for these tests. He probably didn't know it was to see if he had powers, but that's what it was for. And that, I think, is why 11 recognised him straight away, pointed to him, is because he's been to the lab. Because Joyce was part of the project, the experiment, when she was pregnant with him, and so they thought Will might have powers. He did, he just didn't present with them. So why would Joyce keep this secret? Because she's probably quite ashamed of it, because she, you know, put herself under this not very good experiment whilst pregnant with Will. She'd have probably been told not to, threatened, you know, said, you know, everyone you love will be hurt if you do tell anyone. So it was probably a bit of, yeah, embarrassment. Maybe she felt a bit ashamed of it, and because she was threatened to. She couldn't tell anyone for her family's safety, and also probably majorly for Will's safety as well, because if it got out that she was part of this experiment while pregnant with Will, and Will might have something, like might have some powers or something, imagine like what that would do to him as well if that got out. He already was bullied and stuff. She wouldn't have wanted to subject him to all of that, and probably felt she didn't really need to. Everything up until that point was absolutely fine. But yeah, so that's what I think there. It'll explain why 11 recognised him, because to find people in her like mind thing, she has to know what they look like. She has to have a picture. Every moment after, it shows her needing a picture to then find them. She wouldn't have had a picture of Will or had any reason to go and look for him. So how did she recognise him on that picture? It doesn't fully explain how 11 then knew he was in the Upside Down. Maybe it's that because if Will has powers and so does 11, maybe they have like a bit of a connection. That is the only thing, like when she says he's here in the Upside Down, it doesn't quite explain that. 11 couldn't have gone into her like mind thing and found Will in between escaping the lab and finding Mike and everyone. It's either that she saw Will in the lab, or even like maybe there were pictures of him as well, because, you know, maybe they had pictures of all that were part of the experiment, that were born in the experiment, and and they update the pictures as they grow older, and she recognised Will from that. One thing I even thought is in season 4, when it shows some of 11's flashbacks into her time like in the Rainbow Room, there's a couple of times where it zooms in on this kid that is picking up crayons and moving to draw, and part of me did wonder, is that Will? Is that Will? Because obviously we know he loves to draw. Is it him? I'm not sure about that one. Unless she was obviously running in the woods. When she escaped the lab, she was running in the woods. That's how she came across Mike. She might have come across Will when he was running away from Vecna or the Demogorgon. And maybe she saw him being taken. She might have been there. She might have followed. She knew about this other dimension from the previous times when she'd gone into like her mind thing. And so that might be it. She's like, well, if he's not, she saw him disappear. She knows she opened a gate, and that's why she's like, he must be here. I'm not sure though. I'm not convinced on that. So that is the only thing. A few little holes in that, you know, need sort of filling, but I'm convinced that Will has powers. I think Will has been targeted for a reason. I think that it's not coincidence, it's not an accident that Will is the one that is involved, that was taken first, that was possessed by the Mind Flayer. I think it's all, there's a reason it's Will. Whether it was Vecna or the Demogorgon that took Will, I think they targeted him on purpose. It would also explain then why Will survives for so long. He would have been so thrown. When he got to the Upside Down, he'd have been so thrown, like, what's going on? He'd have had to have moved so fast to run away and hide and everything from the Demogorgon. I think Will was left alive on purpose so that he could then be a spy, and because Will has powers and Vecna wanted to use Will's powers because Vecna knew that Will had powers. So yes, I think that Will, like 11, has powers, but I think the powers are a bit different. I think Will has the ability to create. He has creation powers or building powers. 11 can move things. Most of the kids can move things. You've got her sister 8 who can like make you see things. I think Will can like picture things in his mind and basically make them real, create them. Because this would explain how so many of the things that happen, basically it's like D&D. It feels like they're bringing Dungeons and Dragons to life. And I think they are, because they're always playing Dungeons and Dragons, and it's always after they're playing it that then something happens. And I think it's because Will is sort of unknowingly bringing it to life with these powers he doesn't know that he has. And the reason as well I think he has creation powers is because I think he was the one, Will was the one that created the Upside Down or made it look that way. 11 created the bridge, the gate. She opened up the gap and connected Hawkins and this other dimension. This other dimension always existed. No one created this dimension. If you've seen the play, Stranger Things, The First Shadow, there was always this other dimension, Dimension X, but there was just no direct link to it from Hawkins. You couldn't get into the dimension. So that was always there. 11 opens that gate. She connects the two. So basically connects Dimension X and Hawkins. Because it was actually before 11 opened the gate that she sent Vecna, Henry Creel 1, she sent him away. She doesn't send him to the Upside Down, she sends him to Dimension X, and he's stuck in Dimension X and becomes Vecna. And he's basically just then in this dimension, probably planning, and that these monsters, the Demogorgons, already existed, but they came from Dimension X. So I don't think Will necessarily created the Demogorgons. I think these Demogorgons existed in Dimension X. And where 11 sent Henry Creel, Vecna, was to Dimension X with them. The reason why Will can't have made the Demogorgons is because the Demogorgons are shown in Stranger Things, The First Shadow, which is said to be canon by the Duffer Brothers, and that is set before Will is even born. The Demogorgons are in that right at the start. So Will doesn't create the Demogorgons. They just exist in Dimension X, which is where 11 sends Henry Creel to. And then later, when 11 opens the gate in Hawkins Lab, she connects the two. I personally think that she basically maybe creates this like middle land, this almost like bridge area bit between Dimension X and Hawkins. I think there's a bit of a gap here. You know, the reason she opens the gate, she goes into her mind thing and she sees the Demogorgon. She touches it, screams, explodes. Because then something that I always found weird is the fact there's only one Demogorgon. In season 1, there's one Demogorgon. But then later on, you've got loads of monsters. The Upside Down's then raging, it's got lightning, and you've got the Mind Flayer, it's got Demodogs, you've got the Demobats. So much more comes in later. But in season 1, there's one Demogorgon. Joyce and Hopper are able to roam around freely without anything encountering it. Will doesn't encounter any other monsters except for the Demogorgon. And so basically what I think happened here was when 11 went into her mind thing, she saw the Demogorgon, she touched it, ripped open the gate. And I think in all that happened there, she basically unwillingly, not purposefully, brought the Demogorgon forward. She sort of brought it to more towards Hawkins, like out of Dimension X and into this like middle land, almost like this, yeah, the no man's land, this middle bit, the Upside Down, between Hawkins and Dimension X. She sort of brought him forward into that. And that's why there's only one. And in this as well, Vecna also, when this gate ripped open, the Demogorgon came forward, Vecna saw the opportunity and got just enough power to also get through and get into this middle bit, the Upside Down, basically get close closer to Hawkins, get to this bridge area. That means that in the Upside Down, at the start, you just have Vecna and one Demogorgon. Vecna saw his opportunity and took it in the disruption that 11 caused by opening the gates, and like the surge she caused probably caused just a rip in everything, and Vecna was like, you know, being clever, he was able to see, I need to get there. Like the other monsters probably were like, what? I don't know what that is, but Vecna was like, I need to go there. Going back to Will, as I said, I think this middle bit, I think probably just looked like blank, desolate. I don't think it looked like Hawkins yet. I think it was Will who made it look like Hawkins. So I think when Will got taken by either Vecna or the Demogorgon, I think in his like fear of like, where the hell am I, all of that, he would have wanted to be home. He probably was like, I just want to be home. Where is this? Where is home? And I think in that strong surge of emotion he'd have had, in that panic of desperation, I think he basically projected home into the Upside Down. And that is what made it look like Hawkins. It was Will with his creation powers, in all that emotion he was feeling when he got kidnapped and just wanting to be home. He made home. He projected home to the Upside Down. I think it was him that made it look like Hawkins. Elle made the gate, made that bridge, the Upside Down. Will made it look like Hawkins when he got kidnapped, because we don't see what it looks like before Will got there. I think he was the one that did that. Also, what's actually really key, and another sort of bit of evidence as to why I think it was Will that made the Upside Down look like Hawkins, was because, so firstly, as we know, when Nancy goes into the Upside Down in season 4, she says it's frozen in time from the day that Will was taken and 11 opened the gate. Both of those things happened on the same day. So we know one of them made it look like Hawkins, which is because it all happened on that day, and that is the day that Hawkins was frozen. So it was clearly made on that day and stuck in that time. It can be either of them. Why would they throw that in as a potential? If it was 11, I think they just said, yeah, 11 opened the gate, made the Upside Down. But they've kept that open, not confirmed it. And I think because it's not the obvious one you would think is 11 created it, but conveniently, Will was also taken on that day. That's why I think it was actually Will who made it look like that and made a frozen Hawkins. But because also, when 11 is describing the Upside Down, she turns over the board and it's just blank. And she's like, this is the Upside Down, blank, this is it. This is the Upside Down. She doesn't know it looks like Hawkins. She just sees it and she's like, no, the Upside Down, it's just blank. It's just another dimension, there's nothing there. So she doesn't know it looks like Hawkins. She's also not even really seen Hawkins before because she's been in the lab. So how would she project Hawkins into it? It wouldn't be the thing in her head. She probably doesn't even know really where she is because she just lives in the lab. 11 in her head thinks it's completely blank. So it can't have been her. That's why I think it is Will. Because otherwise as well, I think they'd have confirmed by now it was 11 if not. I think the fact they sort of reminded us in season 4, 11 made the gate and Will was taken on the same day, and Upside Down is frozen in Hawkins on that day, on the day Will was taken. I think it's because Will created it. These three at that point were the only things people in the Upside Down. Vecna, one Demogorgon, and Will. And then, because also with Will having creation powers, feels so right in that, you know, he draws so much. Everything he draws is so lifelike. I don't know, I just have this thing of like, it's almost like what he sees, he can literally bring to life. He draws so well. He's literally bringing these images in his head to life on paper. What if he's actually bringing things to life actually in real life as well? He's just got this connection to that dimension, so everything he creates goes there. Because also, like in season 2 then, the first time we see the Mind Flayer is through Will. He keeps sensing this presence, that there's this entity, gets the flashes to the Upside Down, and then there's just the cloud at first, and then it reveals what the Mind Flayer looks like. I think Will basically gives it that form. I think he senses this entity, this like cloud. It doesn't really have a form, but Will, unknowingly through his creation powers, thinking, what could this be? Imagining what it could look like, then made it look like that. He basically created the Mind Flayer, gave it a physical form. I think there's a lot of these entities and Will is giving them a physical form. He literally then creates monsters because he coughs them up. The Demodogs are literally from Will coughing them up. Yes, it only shows him coughing up one into the sink, but he looks horrified by it, but he doesn't look majorly surprised. He looks worried, a bit like it's happened before. And like, you know, in season 2, when they say about the Demodogs, Will has a flashback and thinks about him coughing up that what looks like a slug. And that explains why all the Demodogs are in Hawkins and on that side of the gate, not the other side. Will has literally created all of them. That's probably more literally because he was like incubated, so that's probably how that happened. But he's literally Vecna's like creator, not knowingly or willingly, but he's literally Vecna's creator and builder through the powers he has, and also as like a host for creating these Demodogs, being a spy. Vecna, Henry Creel, he knew that Will had these powers. He was in the Rainbow Room. I think he's been plotting everything the whole time. That's why he's always had his mind that he would use Will, need Will. And when he was in Dimension X, he was planning all of this, knew there was this child in Hawkins with these powers that he could use to create, to build the dimension, to create these monsters, to help him have a connection to Hawkins. So that's why he wants to target Will, because he can then use Will to create everything he wants, to mold the Upside Down to be what he wants, to create the monsters, grow his army and his connection to Hawkins, so then later use him as a spy. All of that. So that's why I think it was all purposeful. And at the end of the season 5 trailer, we see Vecna saying, Will, you're going to help me one last time. Showing that, yeah, Will has literally been helping Vecna this entire time. I think ultimately the season will end with no one can have powers. I think Will needs to lose his powers. Elle will need to have lost her powers. I think Elle's sister 8 will come back, because there was one whole episode with her and it's just not really become relevant since, but I think surely it was there for a reason. So I think she'll come back and help, and she'll either die or she'll also lose her powers. I think whatever's done to like destroy the Upside Down, I think there can't be anyone left with powers, because otherwise the story's still open. There's still the potential that one of them could accidentally do something that causes an issue if they've got powers. It means there's still supernatural stuff and elements of the other dimension in Hawkins, which I don't think the series can have at the end. All of that needs to be closed shut, which is why I think none of them can be left with powers. I think, in terms of like who's gonna die, I don't think loads of them will die. I think the people I think will probably die are Steve, Murray, and maybe one of the Wheeler parents. Potentially Robin, although I'm undecided. But I think a lot of the characters will come out with massive changes. I think Max will survive but will be like blind. I think Elle won't have her powers anymore. I think a lot of them will come out with just big changes. Not that necessarily loads of them die. But yeah, I think all of them will have to have their powers gone. Otherwise it's like, well, stuff could still happen. Because what if someone as well, even in the future, someone else finds out, oh, there's this person with powers, let's try and get them and use them for our benefit. So yeah, that's why either the people with powers have to die or their powers have to be gone. I think in terms of who's going to be key to close the Upside Down, I think it'll be a mix of both Will and Elle. I think Elle is needed to close the gate, but Will is needed to destroy the Upside Down, because that would explain why the Upside Down, no matter how many times Elle has closed the gate, a new way is formed to open it, because the dimension still exists. That bridge, the Upside Down, still exists, and that's what's making it just impossible to fully close that connection. The gate and that middle bridge between almost like Dimension X and Hawkins needs to be gone. Yeah, like I think the Upside Down is basically a third dimension. You have Dimension X, Hawkins, and the Upside Down I think is a third one in between the two. Elle opened the gap to it, maybe even slightly made that third dimension, but Will then sort of solidified it, gave it a form, made it look like Hawkins. So I think both of them are needed to completely destroy it, which is why they haven't been able to do it before, because they didn't know that Will had powers and that he was part of it. So I think they're both needed to destroy it, to get rid of it and fully close it. My full theory is that Joyce, when she was pregnant with Will, was part of Dr. Brenner's project, where she was one of the mothers he was like experimenting on, which meant that Will has powers. He was born with powers, but these powers are different. They're creation powers. So they didn't present themselves the same way as the others. The lab didn't test for it right, didn't know how to test for it, thought he didn't have powers, which is why Will doesn't live at the lab and stay at the lab, potentially why he doesn't have a number tattoo. This would explain why 11 recognises him, because he was maybe in and out of the lab quite a bit for tests, or even maybe his picture was there because they were keeping an eye on him, so she saw him from that. Yes, 11 opened the gate, but I think it was Will that basically created the Upside Down and made it look like Hawkins, and that he did this when he was kidnapped. When he was kidnapped, in his desperation to be home, he unknowingly used his creation powers to create the Upside Down and make it look like home. Vecna knew this. The whole time he knew Will had these powers, which is why he targeted Will. It was a very conscious and purposeful decision to go for Will. It's why he was kept alive on purpose. He's been the main focus of it all on purpose, because Vecna knew he had these powers and how useful they could be. So he used Will to create his army, to form the Upside Down, to create his army, to have a connection to Hawkins. Therefore, it's Elle and Will that are needed to destroy it all. That is my theory. There's definitely some little holes in there, some probably extra bits that need explaining, but I'm really, really confident that Joyce was part of that project. I'm so confident in that, because I actually think it would make no sense that she wasn't if there was an ad going around about wanting pregnant women who can make money by going to the lab. Lonnie, who always is looking for money, at that point has a pregnant wife, they live by the lab, obviously he's going to try and get her to go. But yeah, that is my theory. Let me know what you think. Do you agree? What points do you think are maybe where this falls down? Please let me know. But yeah, I can't wait to see what happens, see what unfolds. We've not got long to wait now. End of the month, we get the first few episodes. I've got a few more videos to do, so make sure you're subscribed and have the notifications on so you don't miss any of my videos. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, I'd be so grateful if you'd smash a big thumbs up. It means the absolute world to me. If you're new here, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any future videos. Thanks so much, guys. Happy Stranger Things month. Let's see what's going to happen. Bye, guys. See you in the next one.